Good morning. Have you had your warm glass of water today? Now, what if your newborn's safety depended on one shot and your mother-in-law refused it? In today's story time with a twist, we unpack a toxic mother-in-law, family betrayal, and the quiet strength of a protective mum. So here's what happened. The mom-to-be, let's call her Emma, was in her final weeks of pregnancy. Everything was ready: the nursery, the diapers, the name. But there was one thing she couldn't control, and it wasn't labor pains. It was her mother-in-law. Emma had one clear boundary. If you want to be around the baby in the first few months, you need the Tdap vaccine. It wasn't a random demand. Doctors recommend it to protect newborns from whooping cough, a disease that can be deadly for infants. Simple, right? Reasonable. Especially in today's world, where protecting a newborn should be common sense. But for her mother-in-law, let's call her Linda, it wasn't about health, it was about control. Linda refused. She didn't just say no, she argued. She turned a medical boundary into a personal insult. And that's when the family drama began to unravel. Now let's pause here, because whether you're a mom, a grandma, or just someone who's witnessed toxic family dynamics, you probably know what's happening under the surface. It's not just about a vaccine, it's about a power struggle, a generational clash, a refusal to respect boundaries set by the next generation of parents. Emma tried to stay calm. She sent Linda a text, polite, direct, and clear. But Linda didn't reply with logic or love. Instead, she called Emma's boyfriend, her son, and tried to go through him. Tried to twist the message, make it seem like Emma was overreacting or being dramatic. That's a classic move in many toxic mother-in-law stories. Triangulating communication, turning the son into a middleman, and avoiding a real conversation with the daughter-in-law. And here's the kicker. Emma's boyfriend didn't take sides. He just said, "I can't change her mind and I can't change yours," which, depending on how you look at it, is either mature neutrality or total avoidance. Either way, Emma was left standing alone, pregnant, anxious, and dealing with the emotional burden of setting boundaries no one seemed willing to support. But she held her ground. That one shot, Tdap, became a line in the sand. Not because she wanted drama, but because she wanted safety. Not because she didn't want Linda around the baby, but because love without respect isn't love, it's entitlement. And let's be honest, stories like these aren't rare. They echo across countless families. The difference is, some speak up and some stay silent. So I'll ask you, if someone in your family refused a basic safety request for your newborn, would you still let them hold the baby? Or would you risk being seen as cold to protect them? One life that depends on you most. Let's talk about it. So Emma stood firm. No Tdap, no baby visits. Simple boundary. Clear line. But here's where things took a strange turn. Linda, the mother-in-law who had just refused a basic health request and gone behind Emma's back, suddenly became overly nice. She started texting Emma sweet messages, asking how she was feeling, offering to drop off groceries, complimenting her on the nursery photos. Almost like nothing had happened, almost like there hadn't been a tense phone call or a rejected vaccine request or a complete dismissal of Emma's role as a protective mother. Now you might be thinking, well, maybe she's trying to make peace, and that would be generous. But let's talk about what really might be happening here. Because when you've dealt with toxic family dynamics, especially in crazy mill stories, you know that niceness doesn't always mean kindness. Sometimes it's strategy. Emma started noticing the shift. Linda wasn't apologizing. She wasn't reconsidering her decision. She wasn't even open to dialogue. She was just pretending, acting as if everything had been smoothed over by sheer politeness. But Emma knew better. This wasn't reconciliation. It was manipulation. And this kind of behavior is something a lot of people in toxic mother-in-law situations can relate to. The passive-aggressive kindness, the sudden acts of love when you set a boundary, the smiling face that hides the hope you'll fold under pressure. What Linda was banking on, whether she realized it or not, was Emma's people-pleasing instinct, the fear of confrontation, the guilt of being the bad guy in the family. Because let's be real, in a lot of wife versus mother-in-law stories, the wife ends up having to bend, to keep the peace, to protect everyone's feelings, except her own. But Emma wasn't bending. She saw the pattern. She saw how this false kindness was just another form of pressure. Not loud, not mean, but heavy. And honestly, manipulation that comes dressed as concern can feel more exhausting than open conflict. She told herself, if I give in now, I'll be setting the tone for the rest of my child's life. This isn't just about one visit, it's about whether or not my decisions are respected as a parent. And that's the heart of so many mother-in-law stories that end up on a relationship drama podcast like this. It's not about hate. It's not about cutting people off. It's about being heard. So now I want to ask you, have you ever felt like someone's sudden kindness wasn't real, but just a way to wear down your no? And if you knew someone was pretending just to get what they want, would you trust them around your child? Let's open that discussion. Have you ever rehearsed a message in your head over and over, knowing it would change everything? That's exactly where Emma found herself after weeks of dealing. With her narcissistic mother-in-law's passive-aggressive kindness, Emma knew it wasn't over. Linda hadn't accepted the boundary. She was simply waiting for Emma to cave, to go into labor, to get overwhelmed, to slip. But Emma had a plan. She wouldn't be calling Linda when she went into labor. No excited updates, no invites to the hospital. Instead, she had drafted a message, firm but respectful, one that honored her role as a mother, and one that clearly restated the boundary. I respect your decision not to get vaccinated, and I ask that you respect mine, that no one without TDAP will be around the baby until it's safe. Now some might say, why send it then? Why not earlier? But for Emma, the timing was symbolic. It was the moment she became a mother, not just physically but emotionally. She was stepping into her protective instincts, into her right to decide what's best for her child, even if it meant tension, even if it meant being called dramatic. And here's the twist. She wasn't sending it while in full-blown labor at the hospital. She planned to send it when labor began, but from home, because she knew Linda might assume that message meant she was already at the hospital, that she had been included, that maybe there was still a path in. But Emma wasn't playing games. She was being intentional. That's the difference between emotional manipulation and emotional maturity. One tries to confuse, the other tries to clarify. And let's be honest, if you've ever followed toxic family Reddit threads or listened to a justnomil podcast, this kind of scenario is all too familiar. The daughter-in-law becomes the gatekeeper, not by choice but by necessity, because sometimes you have to protect your peace, even when it feels unnatural. Emma was nervous. She hated confrontation. Her heart raced just thinking about hitting send. But she also knew, if she didn't follow through now, she'd regret it forever. The true revenge in these stories isn't petty. It's choosing your baby's safety over someone else's feelings. That message wasn't just about vaccines. It was about drawing a line that couldn't be crossed. So let me ask you, have you ever had to deliver a message that you knew would shift the balance of power in your family? Do you think it's fair to hold your ground, especially when it's about a newborn's health, even if it means tension with your spouse's parent? These aren't easy questions, but they're real, and they're at the center of so many family betrayal podcast moments we hear today. Let's talk about it. Have you ever hit send on a message and then waited and waited for a reply that never came? That's what happened to Emma. She had finally sent the message, the one she had rehearsed in her mind for days, the one that took every ounce of courage she had. It was calm, it was respectful, it was honest, and it made one thing very clear. Linda, her toxic mother-in-law, would not be seeing the baby unless she respected the TDAP boundary. Then, silence. No reply, no argument, no emoji, no passive-aggressive comment, just pure, unnerving silence. At first, Emma felt relieved. Maybe, just maybe, Linda was taking the high road this time. Maybe all the crazy mill stories she had heard weren't going to play out in her life. Maybe things were changing. But as hours turned into days, that silence started to feel heavier. It wasn't peace, it was a build-up, a storm cloud on the horizon. You know, in relationship drama podcast episodes, silence is rarely the end. It's usually the beginning of something deeper. Something that brews quietly until it explodes at the worst possible moment. Emma's husband didn't hear anything either. No calls, no "how's the baby" texts, not even a "thinking of you." And this is a woman who used to send baby name suggestions weekly, who showed up uninvited to their ultrasound appointments, who once tried to buy a crib for her own house without asking. And now, radio silence? That wasn't acceptance, that was plotting. Emma couldn't help but wonder, was she waiting for the baby to be born? Was she going to show up at the hospital anyway? Or worse, would she try to guilt her son into inviting her back in after the fact? These moments are exactly why so many women find themselves in wife versus mother-in-law stories. It's not always about loud arguments. Sometimes it's the quiet manipulations, the unspoken guilt, the emotional chess games. And here's the dilemma. How do you prepare for a reaction you can't see? Emma was caught in a moment so many of us fear, the calm before the drama. She started to replay every past interaction, every manipulative comment, every moment where Linda had used silence as a weapon. This wasn't new, it was her pattern. So Emma made a decision. She wouldn't let her guard down just because the air was quiet. She would trust her instincts, not her hope. Because when you're dealing with a narcissistic mother-in-law, silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. So let me ask you this. Have you ever felt more afraid of the silence than the confrontation itself? Do you believe silence can be just as manipulative as words? I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially from those of you who face this exact kind of toxic family Reddit situation in your own lives. Let's open this up for discussion. So here's what happened. The baby girl arrived. Healthy, beautiful, perfect. And Emma? She felt an overwhelming mix of joy and fear. Joy because she was finally a mum. Fear because she knew the silence from her toxic mother-in-law wouldn't last forever. True to her gut feeling, it didn't. Just 2 days after the birth, Linda reached out, not with a congratulations, not with a "how are you?" but with a simple message: "When can I come see my granddad?" Of the TDAP. No acknowledgement of boundaries. Nothing. It was as if all the conversations, the heartfelt explanations, the warnings, it had all been erased. Like it never happened. Classic behavior you see in narcissistic mother-in-law situations. When they don't get their way, they hit pause, then pop back in like nothing's changed. Emma didn't reply immediately. Her husband offered to handle it, but she said no. This time, it had to come from her. So she replied calmly, "We're home and resting. I want to remind you that, as I shared before, we're not allowing anyone near the baby without proof of a recent Tdap vaccination. I hope you understand this is about our daughter's health, not personal feelings." Linda's response? Another classic from the crazy Mill Stories playbook. "I've raised 3 children. I know how to take care of babies. You're being dramatic. This is not how family treats each other." That was the moment Emma knew. This wasn't about a vaccine. It was about control. It was about a mother-in-law who couldn't accept that she's not the mum anymore. Emma stood firm. Days passed, then weeks. Linda began posting passive-aggressive quotes on social media. Family members started texting Emma with guilt-laced messages. One aunt even said, "She's your baby's grandmother. You can't keep her away forever." But Emma didn't waver. Her baby's safety came first. And you know what? That quiet strength, holding a boundary with love and clarity, is the real revenge in stories like these. Not yelling, not fighting, just holding your line and letting them show their true colors. Now, months later, Linda still hasn't seen the baby. She refuses the shot. She refuses the boundary. And Emma, she's okay with that. Because protecting her peace and her daughter matters more than pleasing people. So now I'm turning it over to you. Have you ever had to set a boundary that cost you a relationship but gave you peace? Type yes in the comments if you've ever had to make a hard choice to protect your family. It doesn't have to be a long explanation. Just yes is enough. Let's flood the comments and remind anyone going through toxic family Reddit moments like this that they are not alone. And if you've been in your own husband-mom drama or dealt with family betrayal podcast moments, this is your space. Your story matters. Don't forget to like, share, and follow if these Just No Mill podcast stories resonate with you. We've got more true revenge stories, more drama, and more healing coming soon. You are strong. You are not overreacting. You're just protecting your peace.